12 noon to 1 p.m. You're welcome to join us, of course, by telephone. If I was more competent, I'd have the phone number up in front of me, but I don't, so we'll have to just call it up here. Joe Mangiacotti is my guest, and Joe is the host of a program on WCRN in Worcester. Joe's program is going to be going to the weekdays. It's you cover, Joe, talk a little bit about your show. Sure. And about what you talk about.
Well, the Joe Mangiacotti show is what it's known now, but it origins were about pushing forward. Well, we're going to be 15 years ago when Mike Wade had wanted to continue after his stint on what was called back in the day, if you remember, the Tea Party movement.
Oh, sure.
And there was a Tea Party radio show, and Mike Wade was part of that. And the show went away, and we were coming into 2007, and Barack Obama was on the horizon. And the station hooked him up with me to teach him how to be a radio talk show host, produce the show, and so forth. So we kicked off what was called Conservatively Speaking. And over the years, I think it kind of grew into just this show that I was the on-air producer and then just the co-host. And in December of 2017, Mike stepped down from radio, and I continued as Conservatively Speaking with Joe Mangiacotti. And then, I don't know, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, we just dropped the Conservatively Speaking. So after about 15 years anchoring the weekend morning, 6 to 8 a.m., early gig, guys, but that's radio, right? The station is starting to transition me into weekdays. So yesterday, November 1st, we kicked off the first Monday show. And the next show to be added, or next day to be added, will be Friday. And as we add the days in the week, I'll knock off the weekend hours. So eventually the end result will be the Joe Mangiacotti show will be 1 o'clock Monday through Friday, opposed to early morning weekends. But I mean, that's only a fraction. I've been doing this radio thing since June of 1986.
Okay.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
I mean, you've got the, you've got the classic radio bug,
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
And and your show, besides being on, social media, YouTube, etc., you're on a good old fashioned radio station that's heard live and where people can tune in on AM in their car. So what is that? WCRN?
Yeah, we call it, the old terrestrial radio, right?
Yes.
Is still there, folks, and it's never going to go away. I know they keep saying, "Oh, radio's dead." No, radio will always be there. We will have streaming. We will broadcast in different platforms, but terrestrial radio will always be there, and it's really quite necessary because when internets go down and there's problems, your terrestrial radio station will still be there. So the flagship station is WCRN. It's a powerhouse station, 50,000 watts. And there's only really 3 major commercial 50,000 watt stations in the Boston market. The other station I worked at, the 1060 signal, that has been bought by the Catholic organization. And so they're not a commercial station. So you've got the 1030 and 680, which at sundown drops significantly down in power, whereas WCRN is 50,000 night and day. Our pattern changes at night, but it's still a powerhouse station. Plus our antenna, guys, our stick is out in the Worcester area.
Right.
And those other Boston stations, their stick is on a coastal city. So half of that, 50,000 watts are going out to the ocean. The fish love it, but it doesn't help you, right?
They might hear they hear it in the Azores.
That's they do, and they hear us in the Azores. So our signal is going Worcester. Our footprint is so huge. It's all of Central Mass. It's all of Eastern Massachusetts, the Cape and Island. Our signal goes into Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Hampshire, even into Southern Maine. We have an affiliate in the western part of the state that carries all of our shows too. So that's 7:30 a.m. In the Chicopee area. So if you're in Springfield, you can get 8:30, but it's easier to tune in 7:30. And we have quite a footprint, Charles.
Oh yeah, I mean, technically, your footprint probably goes all the way through upstate New York and right on to even as far as Chicago. So it's
especially at night.
Yeah.
especially at night. Yeah.
And
It's a great signal. It's a great signal. It's a
yeah.
great
And
footprint.
it's the purest form of communication, which is why it'll never go away. It's just a conversation where someone can call in right off the street, get off their mind, get off their chest, whatever they're thinking about. And it's in a way, it's the modern equivalent of the town common
crier.
crier who would put up a soapbox and deliver
Yeah.
Political speech.
I always tell people that, terrestrial radio is the original social media platform.
Yes.
Talk radio is the original where anybody could post, and that's picking up a phone, calling in. I grew up knowing I wanted to do this, right? Listening, if you remember, Larry Glick used to be on overnight on
Sure.
WBZ, the Glicknicks,
Sure.
617-247-5678. And he'd make that little jingle, and my parents would yell upstairs, shut the radio off and go to sleep at 2 a.m. But anybody could pick up the phone, dial that 617-267, and they're talking to 40 at night, right? WBZ goes to 48 states, not on a network, not on a satellite. They're a clear channel. And for those in radio, clear channel means you're the only station on that frequency.
Oh, yeah. There's something very powerful about listening to a live show as opposed to, the kind of canned stuff that you might get. It's almost like listening in on a personal phone call. There's something about, it's always a voyeuristic quality. I mean, I remember, because I think that you and I are about the same age, and I remember listening to Larry King back then and Steve Fredericks. I don't know if you remember him. And it was just great classic radio. And then, of course, in the 1980s, Boston had like a powerhouse of radio hosts with Jerry Williams and David Brodnoy and Gene Burns.
Kane.
Yeah, I mean, these guys, this was like, Boston was the center of the universe in talk
Gene
radio.
Burns. Remember Gene Burns?
Great.
That guy had the largest vocabulary
He did.
than anybody I've ever known or met, right?
Brilliant.
And in that change in radio, Charles, because in the late 70s, AM started to die because it was always all the rock and roll and music was AM. And when in FM stations, when you bought an AM station in the 60s or 70s, they threw the FM in. Then as they realized and they improved the FM and they started to move the formats to FM, AM started to die. Nobody wanted to listen to the Beatles on an AM signal when they had a crisp, clear FM. Right. So we thought, AM's going away. And talk radio saved the AM dial in the very late 70s and early 80s. And here, when we had guys like Gene Burns, David Brodnoy, David Kane, Jess Kane, rather, right? You had these guys changed talk radio forever and set the mold. And even, a big guy today, right? Howie Carr. 40-something stations. He's a newspaper guy that, if you remember, it was he used to do the Governors with wow, I'm drawing the blank.
With Jim Browdy, Jerry Williams and Barbara Anderson.
The Governors. That was every Wednesday.
That was the best show. It was after Dukakis had lost in 1988, and that, I mean, I would never miss that. It was hilarious.
And do you remember what that came from? When he said, you got all these talk show hosts thinking they're the governors running this day. And Jerry Williams said, well, every Wednesday we're going to have the meeting of the governors. Howie Carr, Barbara Anderson, and they did the Governors every Wednesday, and that was Howie Carr's foot into.
He was a protege of Jerry Williams, and Jerry Williams was, I think, a radio genius in that he could turn on the mic and solo talk for 4 hours, and it was brilliant.
Yeah,
it was absolutely engaging. I mean,
let me tell you, folks, whoever's watching this, listening to Charles and I talk, and you're like, "What's the big deal?" Trust me, it's not as easy as guys like him made it look.
Absolutely.
You've got hours. Look at 30 seconds in radio can be an eternity or it can be nothing, depending whether you have content or not, right? You're trying to fit all this information from your sponsor into 30 seconds. You can't do it. But if the mic goes on and you have nothing to say, nothing prepared, 30 seconds is an eternity.
Oh, I know, really. I mean, I'm not boring radio. That's what Jerry did.
Yeah.
The I'm not boring T-shirts and coffee mugs. The guy was a genius.
Yeah.
So, Joe, I want to talk a little bit about some issues. Today is election day. here in
Yeah.
Boston and around the country. The hottest race that I see is in Virginia right now between Terry
Bellwether.
McAuliffe and Youngkin. And it's really one to watch because, you can't talk about this too explicitly on YouTube, but the fact of the matter is that the Republican National Committee, working in conjunction with the Glenn Youngkin campaign, has put together a model to make sure that there is no major voter theft going on, that there will not be a stealing of the election, like many people think might have happened in 2020 in Virginia. The Republican Party thinks it happened, even though they won't say it publicly. But they have basically hired and brought in thousands of volunteers to man the polling booths across that state. I think they're in just about every single precinct. They also have people manning the counting rooms for the early votes, the absentee ballots. There's going to be a Republican in every one of those rooms, which did not happen last time.
Yeah, and not 20 feet behind a chain link fence.
Yeah,
Right,
I mean,
remember that?
in Detroit, they were putting the pizza boxes up in the window so
Yeah.
that nobody could look in, and they were counting at the wee hours of the night. Nothing like that is going to go on in this election, and they've got people who are going to inspect every single ballot to see if it squares properly and if it's legitimate. And they also have a full team of lawyers on staff, on call, experts in election law. And
Yeah.
if anyone sees any shenanigans going on,
Yeah.
all they need to do is call, and they'll be there within an hour.
And they need to have a judge or two on speed dial, because you may need an injunction issued, right? You may need a preservation of order, right? A preservation of records order given. Because now we have these audits that are still attempting to play in Arizona.
Yes.
They turn up some very interesting information, and that's without Arizona officials cooperating. And now data is missing or has been destroyed. And that there should have been a preservation order issued the day of the election. That all of this.
There's stuff that's being illegally destroyed in many states. Those records are supposed to be kept for up to 2 years, and a lot of it's being deleted. Michigan's a particularly egregious example, and so they put in place this model for Virginia, and I think that if it works well today, and if Youngkin wins, even if he doesn't win, but I think he's going to win, then that model is going to be rolled out in all states for the midterm 12 months from now. And, while we can bicker about whether or not 2020 was stolen, the fact is, as they say in corporate, when a corporation is accused of a crime, we didn't do it and we'll continue not doing it going forward.
Yeah.
So they're going to, we're going to keep everybody honest going forward.
Yeah.
We can argue about what happened.
Yeah.
But it looks like that. And yet I hear today, according to the Gateway Pundit, that they're still trying to engage in improprieties. And the example given is that Fairfax County, which is the most liberal county in the state and which accounts for probably the largest piece of the vote, is suburban Washington, D.C., they have put in place a new regulation which does not require that absentee ballots have the last 4 digits of one's social security number on the ballot. Now, that is a violation of the state legislator, which says that they have to. And the state legislator, Article 2 of the US Constitution, the state legislature have the plenary power to make election laws. So that's in complete violation of the state law. But unfortunately, as of yesterday, I think, or maybe early today, a state judge has ruled against a group that's trying to stop this from happening and has said that this can go forward. So this is an ominous sign. I mean, that we're talking about, upwards of 200,000 absentee votes that will not, that might not have a social security number on them.
See, now I got to ask Charles, what is the argument to not require that? What is your possible end result for not wanting that? It doesn't, because when the bill came out in Texas, that was one of the things in the Texas bill, right? The absentee, and you had your ID, sign, witness, and lacking an ID, all you had to do is sign your name and put the last 4 digits of your social.
Yeah,
So I did that. It
Yeah.
took me 7 seconds, Charles.
right.
7 seconds. So 7 seconds to sign your name, put 4 digits, send it in. What is the argument that's a legitimate argument that you don't require those digits?
Well, first of all, I just should note that here in Massachusetts, we are pretty conservative about this. If you get an absentee ballot in this state, and I did one actually, you have to request it from your town clerk, your city clerk. They cross-check whether or not you're registered in that jurisdiction, and they check your address. They mail it to you. You send out a separate sealed envelope that you have to sign. You then send it back to them, and they double check the signature and before they check it off and then cast the vote for you. And if you are found violating those rules, well, putting aside that the ballot could be thrown out if it's not accurate, but if you're found to have cheated somehow, sent in 2 ballots, put in a phony address, that's a $10,000 fine or up to a year in prison. I mean, that's a serious crime in
Should be,
Massachusetts. Oh, yeah.
Now,
And but the justification, I don't know what they said before this judge. I mean, I would guess that what they usually say is that Black men and women don't have social security numbers, I guess. I mean,
how insulting is that to the Black
well, it's
community?
false. Everyone has a social security number. It's just a lie.
But the whole premise is that somehow we have to make allowances for this segment of society, the Black people, brown people, or what have you, because for some reason that implies what? That they're incapable of doing what millions of other people do every day?
Well,
That somehow they're not able to get IDs or hold bank accounts or handle their own affairs? What does that mean?
It's obviously racist. I mean, to suggest that a Black person is
Hugely
not
racist.
Yeah, I mean,
Yet the left
and
doesn't
it's
see
just
it that way.
well,
Right?
it has this kind of paternalistic white man's burden attitude toward Black people, that they're like children, they can't do stuff like everyone else does. And
Yeah.
besides, it's false. Black people have IDs just like everyone else. They get a 6-pack of beer, or they go open a bank account, or they do all of the things that everybody else does that you need an ID.
Absolutely. Now, that being said, what you said about Massachusetts, one of the things, like I said, I've been doing this radio show, and it's a caller-driven show, Charles. It's listener-driven, and we have on a monthly basis. I have State Senator Moore in, and we were talking about the election after the 2020, and we were talking about the absentee in Massachusetts, and we got flooded with phone calls of my listeners saying, "Yeah, I understand that. However, I got an absentee ballot and didn't request it. Not only that, my daughter, who hasn't lived in our house for 18 years, also got an absentee ballot sent to the house." And all in all, people called up saying there were 4 or 5 ballots sent to the house. None of them requested at all.
Well, they
So
sent out
Massachusetts
tens of thousands.
did a mass mailing.
So they sent out unsolicited ballots,
Absolutely.
millions of them across the country. They found this in the canvassing in Arizona, where they found like somebody got 10 ballots. They had ballots sent to post office boxes, to empty buildings, to parking lots, and these were voted. And at the same time, the canvass in Arizona uncovered other votes that were legitimate votes that were not counted in certain districts. They were basically, who knows what happened? I suppose they were tossed in the garbage.
Yeah. Well,
So,
with the recall election, right? Remember, part of the controversy
Yeah.
out there
That's right.
is the way you folded the envelope. You could tell if it was a Republican or Democrat before. So they said a lot of these, the way it was folded, the Republican ballots being mailed back weren't making it back. They just got thrown away.
They found trash bags filled with them in
All of them,
places like
yeah.
Atlanta and Philadelphia. And it was so corrupt. I mean, we can't go too far on this, because YouTube, since the election, has banned too much discussion on this, which is itself quite interesting.
Yeah.
But
Well, I just have one more thing to say on
please,
this.
go right ahead.
And that is, okay, because the same people are involved here. So I'll tell you what, you mail me the COVID test. I'll take it, sign a form and mail it back to you. And then you count me as vaccinated.
Oh,
If it's
okay.
good enough for a vote, right? Well, it's good enough for the COVID test.
Oh, I know, exactly. And then you have with that, you need, well, I don't want to go too, this is
I
another one
know.
of
Yeah.
those.
We're on
The
dangerous
vote-
ground. Got
It's
it.
verboten topics, but you have to have like a passport. Anyway, let me give out my number here, 617-396-4958. If you call in, keep in mind that I can't screen the call, so stick with community standards here. 617-396-4958. Joe Mangiacotti is my guest. He's a radio talk show host in Greater Boston. So Joe, are you watching at all the Boston race for mayor?
From the sidelines, to be honest with you, and you came on my show Saturday morning for a little while and educated me and a lot of my listeners more than we were. For instance, I wasn't aware of Councilwoman Wu's connection to Elizabeth Warren, and that she worked in her office at one time, and that she kind of considers herself, the anointed one to going forward. And that was something. And I was gravitating to Councilor George anyway.
Right.
I something and was it is it Stratton, the former Boston Police Commissioner, Bill Stratton?
Gross.
Okay. So he did a campaign ad, and I thought it was actually really good, because he starts up and he says, hey, wake up, Boston. Do you want to defund the police and end up like Minneapolis and Portland and all these other places? Wake up, take care of your police, don't defund it. And he was doing it in favor of George.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and I think that
has
come out in the past saying that she wants to defund the police, whereas George wants to not only keep funding as is, but actually expand the funding a little bit to include things like social services and
training.
And better training. So I think that that's an issue that's going to help her, because I think that's nationally an issue that's helping state and local candidates. The defund police movement was a disaster for the left. There were other things that Wu is kind of into that's way out there, the Green New Deal, which I don't think has a lot to do with Boston politics, but it shows that she wants to be a national figure.
Yeah.
And she's been endorsed by the so-called Squad, which is really a left-wing cell within the Democratic Party. I mean, they're both liberal Democrats, but she's certainly the left-wing candidate. And the polls show her way ahead. We'll see. I think a lot of it comes down to whether or not Anissa Asabi George will capture the vote that was captured by Marty Walsh. And that was the Black vote, the minority vote, the inner city. The city, if you looked at, I was like, the Boston Globe does a very good job of a post-election map where they show like exactly who voted what and where. And I remember the Walsh vote, it was like a donut. He captured the inside of the donut, which was Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, Hyde Park.
Yeah, great dense population.
Yeah, the big inner part of the city, whereas his opponent, whose name escapes me right now, very liberal and further to the left, he did the edges of the city, the more white, liberal, wealthy, suburb, almost
that guilt will get you every time, that white guilt.
West Roxbury, parts of Roslindale that border Newton, Jamaica Plain, the Back Bay, parts of Charlestown, Alston, Brighton, these kind of more slightly wealthier, slightly, frankly, whiter parts of Boston. And I think if the election breaks that way, then George will take it. But we'll see. It depends on whether people come out and vote for her.
Yeah,
it depends on turnout.
It's a nice day, so I hope that plays its role in getting the voters out. This will actually be. I'll be voting today in Framingham, a newly minted city,
right?
And for the first time in like 30 years, because I just recently relocated back to Metro West from the Worcester area for years, for a couple decades, 2.5 decades out there. And so back in Framingham, where my family, I grew up in Natick, Charles, and all now the great nieces and nephews are in the Framingham Natick area. So I'll be voting for the first time in Framingham since probably 1990, 1989 or something.
Okay, what's happening in Framingham? I know that they had their first mayor, the first big city.
Yeah,
And it
Spicer.
was America's largest town
Yep.
for a long time, and then they
Finally became a
city.
city.
And
And
she's an
that
African
was a
American woman.
well, that was a big thing for a lot of years because Denison, which was a huge employer at one time, the factory, now that it's converted to lofts and stuff, and the GM plant wanted a township, wanted a town form of government. And every time Framingham would kind of threaten to become a city, Denison would, no. And so now those big companies are gone and they're out of the picture. And they went ahead and became a city. And the first mayor was this Mayor Spicer.
Yeah.
I don't know her, except I know that she's in that far left progressive, mentality, and running against Charles Stastic, who is the challenger, who would be the second mayor. So she was the first mayor.
Right.
So I don't know a lot about them. I do know a few things about her. I recently found out, she had never voted till she ran for mayor.
Oh boy.
So she doesn't have a voting. She's not a voting. Not that she doesn't have a voting record. She doesn't have a voting history. So here's a woman who didn't even participate in the election process and became the town's first mayor. And I suspect that I wasn't in Framingham at the time nor watching the race then, but I suspect that she used a lot of those really cool buzzwords, Charles,
But she now has a record. She's been in office for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It should be interesting to see. I don't know much about Framingham politics, but it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
It is going to be interesting. I was out yesterday, and all I saw at intersections was Charles Stasek signs, none of hers.
And I see the same thing here in Boston with Anissa. Her signs are everywhere. They're more in the minority neighborhoods. They're more blue collar working people. You see her, she's got that kind of support. And you don't see a lot for Wu other than in places like West Roxbury and Back Bay. But I don't know. I mean, it's going to be hard to say. I mean, I watched the WGBH, the Channel 2 program, and they keep saying that Wu is way ahead. But I don't know who watches that other than probably most of the people who watch that probably
are already voting for her.
Yeah, they're either voting for her or they don't live in Boston anyway. They live in Lincoln and Weston, and Wellesley, so we'll see what happens. What else is going on, Joe?
Well, of course, we talked already about Virginia, which is just a huge bellwether situation there. You've got Terry McAuliffe, who seems to want to run against Donald Trump because he has nothing else. Right. Joe Biden goes there last Thursday. He says Trump's name 24 times in his speech. Yesterday, Terry McAuliffe on a stump, it was 13 times he mentioned it. He's not on the ballot, guys. And because he doesn't have every poll says the top three major things there are education and COVID and gas prices, inflation. Racism isn't anywhere in there, but they want to make everything about race. They want to try to convince you that Youngston is nothing but a knockoff, a Trump in a fleece vest. And I think that they totally underestimate the parents. They underestimate the electoral, and they do that a lot. All right, especially when the voter turnout is coming out, and this education issue is going to cause a high voter turnout. And when you have that poor father showing up at the school board meeting because his 14-year-old daughter's raped in a bathroom at a school, and they cover this thing up and they tell him to not to talk about it. They took that clip of him getting arrested and purposely, and the media did their job, right, for the Democratic Party, and pretended it was all about this guy getting out of control when he was there about the rape of his daughter. And I think that was a disgusting display of media's compliancy in furthering the Democratic agenda. I thought that was a horrible thing to watch, and I'm glad that the truth has come out on that. And that is only going to lead to parents saying, what is going on? Now, this past year, the Virginia school system has dropped 10,000 students. So where are they going? They're moving out of state, or they're going to private schools, like Terry McAuliffe's 4 children did.
Oh, did they?
Oh, yeah. He says the school system's wonderful, but he sends his kids to private.
Oh, that's very damning.
Yeah.
So these kids are in private school. Meanwhile, they got Virginia. There were reports around the country of the teaching of critical race theory, which is really a divisive and racist division of people. It's a horror show. And then that, along with very explicit sex education, with material that would by any standards be called pornographic, and it's being, so you have parents who are showing up at school board meetings and complaining about it and showing this material and reading it for the public to see. And this group called the but this, what is it?
You can't do that. You can't say that in a school board
Can't
meeting.
say that, because it's wrong.
But you can teach it to my 9-year-old.
But it's in the school library, exactly. And then you have this group called the National School Board Association, which is a far left-wing group, at the prompting of the Biden administration, sending a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland saying that parents, moms and dads who are showing up at school board meetings should be investigated as domestic terrorists, which of course expands the definition to probably include people like you and me.
Absolutely.
And this outrage is then, Garland then goes ahead and he authorizes the FBI to look into this. I believe that they might have had something to do with the arrest of this father in Loudoun County. And he's questioned about it at congressional hearings. Turns out he has a conflict of interest as well, because his son-in-law, Zan Tanner, was the founder and is presently the co-CEO of an organization called Panorama, which teaches critical race theory at schools across the United States, and which is raking in who knows how
he's
many
making millions of dollars selling CRT curriculums.
That's right.
And the thing there is, now we find out that the letter from the School Board Association wasn't in fact the entire board. It was a few rogue members, worked with the White House, sent the letter. Some of the members got caught off guard and surprised. They've resigned. 11 states have withdrawn membership from the School Board Association because they said, this wasn't voted on. We didn't know about this. You guys, a couple of you just went ahead and did this. So we're out. 11 states undid their membership. Sure. Then that goes over the weekend. That Monday, I mean, when does the government ever work this fast? That Monday, Merrick Garland's issuing a memo activating the most powerful law enforcement organization in the country, the FBI, to look into parents. That also, Charles, is what is going to get the parents out there to vote today in Virginia, because this was an attempt to silence them. And when Senator Cruz put it to Attorney General Merrick Garland on the stand, at the congressional hearing on this, he was even surprised. He thought he was going to, because why did you do this? He was expecting him to cite this investigation or study into uptick of crime. No, first thing he says is, the letter. And then the news reports. And of course, the news reports are because of the letter. Like, we're back to the Steele dossier. Right. And that whole, I will leak it to the media. So now it's a media report. Now I'm going to quote this news story to the FISA court on the news story that we planted.
I think that since then, this radical organization called the National School Board Association has withdrawn the letter and apologized.
Absolutely.
States are dropping out like flies. I mean, everyone's leaving. But yet, I don't think that Merrick Garland has walked away from it.
No,
they're still, and this is something that is going to criminalize, the 75 million votes that Trump got and then some, that we can all now be considered as domestic terrorists under this definition. So this is unprecedented in American history, that you would have a federal government actually classifying average citizens as terrorists, which has a lot of very bad implications. So
for nothing more than expressing their opinion, exercising their First Amendment rights. They want to make it up, and they would make it very difficult, right? They would set the agenda. They wouldn't let them talk. On that particular meeting where that gentleman got arrested, they had put the word out early, and they wanted it to stack the audience, if you will, with pro-trans activists and LGBTQ, and to monopolize the conversation. And then now they're doing this. I don't know if you caught this. Now this thing is when you go to speak at these meetings, you have to state your name and address. So they're basically forcing you to dock yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that everybody who goes up, fine. I'm going to give my name and address, and I'm going to give the name and address of every school board member as well. As long as your name and address is on the record with mine, I'm okay with that. So everybody knows who you are and who I am.
And that's perfectly fair under the circumstances. And,
Yep.
you know, what I would say is that
Sorry about
whether
that.
or not you agree with these issues, you might think that CRT and the sex education is wholesome as apple pie and motherhood. That's your right.
Yep.
All we're saying is that people have to be heard and that there has to be a legitimate debate. There is a right to dissent. These are American traditions, both in law and in custom, and that they have to be upheld by all of us, because you who are supportive of these things might be on the other end of the barrel in the future, and
That's right.
we would defend you. So
Yeah.
so anyway,
You remember back in the day when the ACLU was the defender of freedom of speech and the defender of this, but now it's just a political organization, and they'll only defend you if you agree with them, if you're part of the narrative.
Oh,
That's it.
they've become openly
Yeah.
supportive of this kind of oppression and suppression of free speech, and not to mention the suppression of the vote, which is another subject that we can't necessarily get into. I can see I've just been kicked off of TikTok. Probably mentioned something about that. I mean, they'll give me a 1-week suspension and then I'll be back. That's the world I'm in, Joe. You know, you just there's a constant pressure.
How much
Anyway.
energy, how much effort is it taking him to watch a couple jamokes like us talking to make sure that, you know, what we're saying on TikTok was, you said TikTok, you got kicked off?
TikTok, yeah, TikTok. I think that probably what happened.
That's the Chinese owned one, right?
Well, yeah, but no, they've been fine. I think the way that works is that somebody got their nose bent out of joint over something that you and I said that we can't really know.
Yeah.
And they contacted TikTok and they responded. That's what happens. That's like this sort of cancel culture. If you say something in 1952, you said something, you were seen, you know, doing something, and you're completely airbrushed off the picture, like Stalin used to do.
Yeah.
When he'd have a picture of all of his, you know, cohorts, and then the next year they'd have the same picture, and 1 or 2 people would not be there.
Yeah.
They'd
Yeah.
be airbrushed.
Yeah. Well, you know, the thing about what you just said would probably happen. Somebody was watching, listening, and they didn't like our opinion or whatever. But, you know, I say to that person, what's your problem? Because you gave out a phone number. Why don't you call up and say, Charles, Joe, I think you guys are just full of it, or off base, or you're wrong. Let me tell you why you're wrong. That's what this is supposed to be. But no, they're gonna do a little, you know, I guess anonymous complaint, right? A file or something, and instead not debate us, but silence us. And that's a sad commentary, not just on society, but for whoever that jamoke is that did it.
Well, they don't want to debate us because they don't want to lose. And
This is true.
and also, I think that generally, and this is true on both sides, there is less of that kind of debate going on now. People don't talk to each other.
Such a shame.
I mean, I used to have people, when I did my show at Tufts University, and when I did it like in small markets, I'd have liberals and people on the left. I had Noam Chomsky come on with me, doing several interviews. Barney Frank would come on with me.
Yeah.
Now they won't come on with me. And I don't think it's personal. I think it's just that people on the left no longer talk to anybody. And I'd say probably the same thing for people on the right to an extent, although less so. But
I think people like Candace Owens will go anywhere.
Oh, yeah,
I think
exactly.
Ben Shapiro would debate anyone. Dan Bongino would debate anyone. You know, I don't think for most of the right icons in media and talk, I don't think any of them would back down from a debate at all.
Right.
You know,
You're absolutely right.
As a matter of fact, Dan Bongino would do that part in his show where he invites a left on and says, "Okay, here's the topic. You know, defend it, explain it." Now he's and he would just demolish him every time. Right. Now he no one will go because they can't win.
That's right. I mean, the late Rush Limbaugh used to do that all the time. He'd always have like put the liberal first in line.
Yeah.
In callers. So Joe, anyway, let my listeners and viewers know where they can hear your show and how they can get in touch with you.
Sure. The show is, again, the flagship station is WCRN AM 830. That's heard all over central and eastern Massachusetts. We're also live streaming always on the TuneIn app. So you just tune in, punch in WCRN. You can save it in there if you want, but you can stream us and take us anywhere. I always stream the show. I was doing Facebook Live up until this past weekend when we switched to YouTube. YouTube has finally authorized me to live stream, and that's surprising. So we'll see
So
how
be
long that
careful on
lasts.
YouTube. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
We'll see how long they allow that to go on. But I always have a camera streaming somewhere. If it's not that, it's Facebook. But we'll expand that. But the point is, you can always find us on the radio at AM 830, AM 730, on TuneIn at WCRN, and of course go to tjamshow.com. All our past shows are podcasts now and can be heard as well on SoundCloud.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Joe Mangiacotti. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me. As always, great conversation. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Congratulations on your new show.
Yep. Well, just the expansion of the show.
Yes.
The movement. Yeah. It's the same show, same guy, same, just me and my fedora.
It's just onward and upward. There you
Onward
go.
and upward. Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you very much. And
All right.
appreciate this. This is always a fun time to join you, Charles.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks a lot.